I was sent to breed with an alien. I never expected to fall in love. The message arrived on a quiet morning when the space station was slowly waking up. Soft lights glowed along the curved walls, and the distant hum of engines felt almost comforting. Elias Moore was sitting alone in the observation bay, watching a blue-white star rise over the metal horizon. He liked mornings like this. They gave him time to think. The message changed everything. It came from Earth Command, marked urgent but written in careful, polite language. Elias read it once, then again, hoping he had misunderstood, but the words stayed the same. He had been selected, not chosen, not invited, selected. Humanity had reached farther into the galaxy than anyone had ever imagined. New worlds, new species, new alliances. But with all that progress came problems no one had planned for. One of humanity's earliest alien allies, a species called the Ilori, was facing extinction. Their population was declining, not because of disease or war, but because they could no longer reproduce fast enough to survive. The Ilori were intelligent, calm, and ancient. Their society valued logic, balance, and long-term thinking. Emotions were understood but not celebrated. Love, as humans knew it, did not exist in their culture. Reproduction was biological, ceremonial, and rare. When their scientists discovered that limited compatibility with humans was possible, the galaxy held its breath. The program that followed was not popular. Many humans protested. Others refused to talk about it at all, but the truth was simple. If nothing was done, the Ilori would disappear within 2 generations. Elias was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He was a xenolinguist, trained to understand alien languages and cultures. His file described him as patient, emotionally stable, and adaptable. Those traits mattered more than strength or status. He closed the message and stared out into space again. He had 24 hours to respond. The journey to the Ilori homeworld took weeks. During that time, Elias studied everything he could. Their cities were built from living crystal structures that adjusted to light and sound. Their language used tones and color shifts instead of words alone. Physical contact was rare and formal. Most important of all, the program rules were clear. The assignment was not romantic. It was not personal. It was a responsibility. Elias told himself this every day. When he finally arrived, the planet was unlike anything he had seen. Soft silver skies stretched over calm oceans. Light seemed to bend gently around the landscape as if the world itself was breathing. The air felt warm but not heavy, alive but not overwhelming. He was welcomed by a small delegation. They did not smile, but their eyes were curious. Tall, slender, with skin that reflected light like polished stone, the Ilori moved with slow grace. Their leader introduced herself as Siren. She explained the process in clear, careful terms. Elias listened, nodded, and asked respectful questions. Everything was professional, controlled. Then he met his assigned partner. Their name was Luri. Luri stood slightly apart from the others. Their eyes were a deep, shifting blue, like water under ice. When they looked at Elias, there was no fear, no excitement, just calm observation. Elias felt his heart beat a little faster, and he hated himself for it. They were escorted to a private living space designed for shared habitation. The room was simple, filled with soft light and smooth surfaces. No sharp corners, no clutter. Everything had a purpose. For the first few days, they barely spoke. Luri observed Elias closely. How he moved, how he ate, how he reacted to silence. Elias tried not to fill the quiet with nervous words, but sometimes he failed. He joked once about missing coffee. Luri did not understand, but asked him to explain. When he did, they listened carefully, as if storing the information away. Communication came slowly. Elias taught Luri human expressions. Smiles, laughter, the meaning of a sigh. Luri taught Elias how Ilori shared thoughts through light patterns along their skin. It was not emotional, they explained. It was informational. Still, something changed. Elias noticed that Luri began adjusting the room's lighting to match his mood. When he was tired, the light softened. When he was anxious, the colors cooled. Luri never mentioned it. One evening, Elias spoke about Earth, about rain and music and people gathering just to talk. Luri listened longer than usual. "Why do humans gather without purpose?" Luri asked. Elias thought for a moment. "Sometimes the purpose is just to feel less alone." Luri was silent for a long time after that. The program schedule continued. Medical scans, genetic discussions, formal ceremonies that meant little to Elias but everything to the Ilori elders. Through it all, Lurie remained calm, focused, and kind in a distant way. Yet small moments stood out. Lurie began asking questions not required by the program, about human childhood, about why humans created art that served no function, about sadness and why humans felt it so deeply. Ilias answered honestly, even when the answers made him feel exposed. One night during a long planetary storm, the lights in their living space dimmed unexpectedly. Ilias felt uneasy. He did not like the dark. Lurie noticed his breathing change and adjusted their skin's glow, filling the room with soft light. "You are distressed," Lurie said. "A little," Ilias admitted. "It reminds me of being alone." Lurie considered this. "You are not alone." The words were simple. The effect was not. As weeks passed, the elders began to observe unusual changes in Lurie. Increased creativity, slight emotional responses, longer periods of unstructured thought. These were not considered dangerous, but they were unprecedented. Whispers began. Some elders feared humans were influencing the Elori too deeply. That emotional attachment could weaken their culture. That the program was becoming something it was never meant to be. Ilias sensed the tension, but did not fully understand it until Siren visited him privately. "You have formed a bond," she said carefully. Ilias did not deny it. "I didn't plan to." "Plans are irrelevant," Siren replied. "The council is concerned if this continues, the program may be suspended." Ilias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "What happens then?" "You will return to Earth. Lurie will remain." That night, Ilias sat quietly, staring at the shifting lights on the walls. Lurie stood nearby, watching him with that same calm gaze. "Are you going to leave?" Lurie asked. "I don't know," Ilias said honestly. Lurie stepped closer. Not touching, just closer than before. "I am experiencing something new," Lurie said. "When I consider your absence, my thoughts become disordered." Ilias looked up. "That sounds like missing someone." Lurie tilted their head. "Then I do not wish for you to leave." Ilias realized in that moment that the assignment was already over. Whatever this was, it was no longer part of any program, and the galaxy was not ready for it. The next morning felt different to Ilias, even before anyone spoke to him. The light in the living space shifted more often than usual, moving between calm colors and uncertain tones. Lurie stood near the window, watching the distant silver clouds drift across the sky. They were still, but not calm. Ilias did not ask questions right away. He had learned that silence meant more to the Elori than rushed words. He sat and waited. After a long moment, Lurie spoke. "The council met during the night." Ilias felt his chest tight. "And they are divided," Lurie said. "Some believe the changes in me are progress. Others believe they are risk." Ilias nodded slowly. "And what do you believe?" Lurie turned to face him. Their skin shimmered faintly, not with clear information patterns, but something less controlled. "I believe I am becoming more aware." That word stayed with Ilias, aware. The council summoned Ilias later that day. The chamber was wide and open, filled with soft light and gentle echoes. Siren stood at the center, surrounded by elders whose eyes reflected careful thought. "You were not sent here to change us," one elder said. "I know," Ilias replied quietly. "I never tried to." "Yet change has happened," Siren said. "Lurie now experiences attachment, concern, and emotional focus. These traits are rare among our people." Ilias met her gaze. "Among humans, they are normal. They help us survive." Another elder spoke. "They also cause pain." "Yes," Ilias said, "but they also create meaning." The chamber fell silent. Siren finally said, "The council will observe one final phase. You and Lurie will be separated for a short period. We must see if the bond fades." Ilias felt the weight of the words settle into him. "And if it does, then we will need to rethink everything." The separation was quiet and respectful, but it felt heavier than any confinement. Ilias was moved to a nearby research habitat. It was comfortable, clean, and empty. Days passed slowly. Ilias followed the schedule, spoke with researchers, answered questions about human emotions again and again. He explained love not as a sudden force, but as a growing connection. Trust, care, patience, the choice to stay. At night, he felt the absence deeply, not in fear, but in quiet longing. Lurie, meanwhile, struggled in ways the council had never recorded before. Without Ilias, their thoughts lost focus. Colors on their skin shifted without reason. Sleep cycles became irregular. When asked to describe the sensation, Lurie said, "There is a lack." The elders did not like that answer. After 1 week, the council reconvened. Siren spoke first. "The bond has not faded." one elder said. It has strengthened. Another added, Lurie's cognitive range has expanded, creativity metrics are higher, problem-solving has improved. But emotional dependency is dangerous, another argued. Siren raised her hand gently. Or it is unfamiliar. She turned to Lurie. Do you feel weakened? Lurie answered without hesitation. No, I feel connected. The word echoed through the chamber. Siren then looked at Elias. Would you choose to remain even without obligation? Elias swallowed. Yes. The council withdrew to deliberate. Time passed slowly again. When they returned, Siren spoke with clarity. The program will change. No more forced assignments. No more duty without choice. Humans will not be tools. Elori will not be subjects. Elias let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. You and Lurie may remain together, Siren continued. If you both consent. Lurie stepped closer to Elias, not touching but close enough to feel warmth. I consent, Lurie said. So do I, Elias replied. The announcement spread quickly. Across the planet, discussions began. Some Elori were afraid, others were curious. Humans across the Alliance listened closely. Something new was beginning. In the weeks that followed, Elias and Lurie lived not as participants but as partners. They learned together. Elias learned how Elori history valued stability above all else. Lurie learned how humans found strength in change. They did not rush anything. Their bond deepened slowly, built on shared experience rather than expectation. Other Elori began requesting contact with humans. Not for reproduction, but for understanding. Human ambassadors noticed something unexpected. Elori technology began shifting. Designs became more flexible. Art appeared in public spaces for the first time. Patterns not meant to solve problems, but to express thought. Lurie became a bridge between cultures. One evening, Elias and Lurie stood by the ocean, watching light reflect across calm waters. Humans accept uncertainty, Lurie said. We live with it, Elias replied. Sometimes we even welcome it. Lurie considered this. I believe it has made us stronger. Elias smiled softly. Years later, the Alliance would record this period as a turning point, not because of a treaty or invention, but because one species chose empathy over fear. When the first child was born from a human and Elori partnership, there was no ceremony filled with control or expectation. Only quiet celebration. The child's skin reflected light and warmth together. Their eyes held curiosity instead of distance. Siren, now older and slower, watched from a distance. Humanity did not save us, she said to Elias once. They reminded us that survival is more than continuation. Elias looked at Lurie, then at the child, and finally at the endless sky above. Sometimes the greatest strength is not power. It is the courage to care. And the galaxy would never be the same again routine, but years passed with quiet change. What had once been an experiment had now become a shared life, and that life slowly reshaped two species. Elias often watched Lurie as they worked. Lurie had taken a role as a cultural guide, helping both Elori and humans understand one another without fear. Their voice remained calm and steady, but their words carried warmth now. That alone still surprised many of the elders. The child named Aaron grew faster than anyone expected, not physically but mentally. Aaron asked questions constantly. Questions about stars, about people, about why some beings laughed and others stayed silent. Their mixed heritage made them curious, not confused. Elias spent many evenings telling Aaron stories about Earth, about forests and cities, about mistakes and hope. Lurie listened too, even when the stories were not meant for them. They liked how stories carried emotion without demanding logic. Change did not come without resistance. Some Elori still believed emotion would weaken their society. They did not act with anger but with concern. Meetings were held, long discussions filled with careful words. Elias was often invited not as a representative but as a witness. You brought instability, one elder said during a gathering. Elias answered calmly. We brought possibility. Lurie stood beside him. And choice. That word had become powerful. More human visitors arrived over time, not for programs but for learning. Artists, teachers, scientists, they came not to fix the Elori but to share space with them. Slowly, trust replaced caution. Elori children began drawing patterns that meant nothing practical. Just feelings, just beauty, no one stopped them. Aaron became a symbol without ever being treated as one. They played with both human and Elori children, switching languages easily. When asked what they were, Aaron once said, I am both, so I am more. That sentence spread far. Elias sometimes worried about the future. Humanity had a long history of fear when things changed too quickly, but he also knew something important. Humans learned fastest when love was involved. One evening, Elias and Lurie stood again by the ocean. The light reflected differently now, shaped by new structures along the shore, not functional ones, artistic ones. "Do you regret this path?" Elias asked softly. Lurie did not answer right away. "No," they said finally. "I regret that we waited so long to walk it." Elias smiled. The Alliance later rewrote its laws. No species could ever again be asked to sacrifice connection for survival. Cooperation was no longer about advantage. It was about shared future. Other species took notice. Some came with caution, others with hope. Humanity's reputation shifted. They were no longer seen only as builders or explorers, but as connectors. A species that could sit quietly, listen deeply, and stay. Years later, when Elias grew older and slower, he still watched the stars. But now Aaron stood beside him, taller, thoughtful, full of quiet strength. "What will I be to the galaxy?" Aaron asked once. Elias answered honestly, "Whatever you choose." Lurie placed a gentle hand on Aaron's shoulder. "And you will never choose alone." The galaxy did change after that. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily. And it all began not with power or force or fear. It began when a human was sent to fulfill a duty. Elias did not notice when his hair first turned fully white. On the Elori world, mirrors were rare, and time felt gentle rather than sharp. But Lurie noticed. They always did. One morning, as soft light moved across the living space, Lurie touched Elias' hair with careful fingers and studied it with quiet attention. "Your time moves differently than mine," Lurie said. Elias smiled. "It always did." There was no sadness in the words, only truth. Aaron had grown into adulthood, tall and calm, carrying both human warmth and Elori focus. They worked now as a mediator across species, traveling between worlds where fear still lived. When Aaron spoke, people listened, not because of power, but because of understanding. The galaxy had changed in small but important ways. Many species still kept distance, still feared emotional connection. But humanity's example had spread, not through force, through presence. Elias spent more time resting now. He walked slowly along the ocean shore, often with Lurie beside him. The silver waves still reflected the sky, but new colors had joined them. Structures of light and art stood along the coast, built by Elori hands guided by curiosity rather than duty. One evening, Aaron returned from a long journey. They sat with Elias and Lurie as the sun dipped low. "Some worlds are afraid," Aaron said. "They think emotion will erase them." Elias nodded. "Fear always says that. But others are listening," Aaron continued. "They ask how humans learn to live with feeling." Lurie looked at Elias. "We learned by failing," Elias said gently, "and by choosing to care anyway." That night, Elias slept deeply. When he woke, the light was softer than usual. Lurie sat nearby, still and focused. Elias understood without words that something important was happening. "You are nearing rest," Lurie said quietly. Elias reached for their hand. "I'm not afraid." "I know," Lurie replied. Their skin glowed with emotion now openly, without shame. Aaron arrived soon after. They sat with Elias, holding his hand, listening to his slow breathing. "Remember," Elias said softly, "you don't need to be a symbol." Aaron smiled. "I know, I just need to be myself." That was enough. Elias passed peacefully, surrounded by love without pain or fear. The Elori had no tradition for mourning like humans did, but they learned. They stood quietly by the ocean. Humans across the Alliance paused their work. Stories were told, not of what Elias achieved, but of who he was. Lurie did not withdraw, they did not shut down. They grieved openly, something no Elori had done before, and in doing so they taught their people that loss did not weaken love. It proved it existed. Years passed. Aaron became a guide not only between species, but between generations. They taught that identity was not a boundary, but a bridge. That survival without meaning was empty. New children were born across worlds, mixed not just in genetics, but in culture. Schools taught empathy as a skill. Councils included voices once ignored. Humanity was no longer the loudest species in the galaxy, but they were the most trusted. Lurie continued to live, carrying Elias' memory not as pain, but as warmth. They often stood by the ocean alone, watching the light, feeling the quiet presence of a human who had once sat there too. One day, Aaron joined them. "The galaxy is different now," Aaron said. Lurie nodded. "Because one human chose connection over fear." And one Ilori chose to change, Aaron added. They stood together, watching the endless sky. Far away, new stars were being reached, new species were being met, and wherever humanity went, they carried the same quiet strength, not conquest, not control, but the courage to care. And that was how humanity left its mark on the galaxy, not in monuments or power, but in hearts that learned how to feel.